and welcome to WION World is One. I'm Ghadi Francis and this is the West Asia Post, our weekly show where we bring you all the latest updates from the world's most volatile region. Starting from Lebanon, where I'm currently standing, clashes broke out in the capital, Beirut, as pro-Hezbollah protesters took to the streets against the lead judge who is currently probing last year's catastrophic Beirut port blast. Protesters demanded the removal of Judge Tariq Bitar. With gunfire, snipers and ambulance sirens echoing in Beirut. The Beirut port investigation has faced obstacles ever since Judge Tariq Bitar sought to question some of the most powerful people in Lebanon. We tell you more.
Bullets bouncing off residential buildings. Snipers on roofs of houses. Residents crouching inside their homes. And the sound of ambulance sirens. The scenes that filled the streets of Beirut on Thursday were all too familiar to many Lebanese citizens. The same groups, the same neighborhoods. The violence reviving the ghost of Lebanon's 1975 civil war. At least 7 people were shot dead in what was the worst violence Beirut has witnessed in years. The latest bloodshed adds to the woes of a country suffering one of the world's worst ever economic meltdowns. So how did it all begin? In the center of it all is the Beirut port blast probe. Pro-Hezbollah protesters took to the streets demanding the removal of the judge investigating this blast. Judge Tariq Bitar called for questioning senior politicians and officials suspected of negligence that led to the explosion. Some of the most prominent suspects are Shiite allies of the Hezbollah. One of them is Ali Hassan Khalil, a former finance minister. Other officials that were called for questioning are former Prime Minister Hassan Diab and senior Christian politician Youssef Finyanos. The violence centered around Tayuni. It all started in the morning during the protests. Sniper fire of unconfirmed origin hit a group of protesters, sparking a response. It led to a volley of gunfire with families running for cover. Hezbollah and Amal have accused the Lebanese forces for firing. Interior Minister Bassam Maulawi said that snipers had opened fire and aimed at people's heads. Meanwhile, the LF denied any involvement. When I reached this site, just after the violence, the Lebanese army was already there. Tanks were rolling into the neighborhood, with soldiers deployed in parts of Beirut.
A standoff between the judge investigating the disastrous Beirut port blast and top politicians has roiled Lebanon's cabinet and escalated to the streets. Don't be fooled by the normal motion behind me as I speak. This is not unusual in Lebanon, but on the other street, there's been gunfire, rocket RPG, and other clashes, and they're still ongoing. The Lebanese army is trying to control the streets after arms were shot at protesters this morning at At-Tayuni Square. This square is on the road leading to the court where pro-Hezbollah protesters were headed today. This has left Lebanon in a political deadlock after the financial collapse and now in a high security civil unrest.
Ambulances rushed the wounded to the hospital. Dead bodies were removed from the streets. Residents cowered in corridors away from windows, and children in a nearby school tucked under desks. These were scenes that the capital had seen before, but were not ones that they wanted to relive.
This is where it all started in Beirut. As you can see, the signs of clashes are still here. The security forces are still investigating, and the intelligence forces for the Lebanese army are still on the ground. They've initiated the process of finding the perpetuators and who started it all. Up so far, 10 have been identified as per local media. Putting everything into context, I'm standing here in the street that is in a very volatile area. It reminds of many phases of the civil war in Lebanon. Right here, this street is called Sami Sulh. It is basically the junction between the Tayuni Square, where the snipers started gunfires, and the Justice Palace, which is in the end of the road. Protesters were coming as per the call of Hezbollah and allies. Protesters were going and headed towards the Palace of Justice when this all started. In this ally, as the investigation is still ongoing, and up so far nobody has been arrested, but the Lebanese army says that they are on it.
I visited Tayuni after the situation improved. This was the same area that was once a battleground in the civil war, lying at the crossroads of Shiite and Christian bastions.
This scene took us back to 1975. I was 10 or 11 years old. Same scene repeating. The videos, the pictures in my head since I was a kid. Now it's repeating.
Meanwhile, Lebanese President Michel Aoun condemned the violence, saying that he will ensure truth behind the clashes is revealed.
What happened will be the subject of security and judicial follow-up. And I, for my part, will ensure that the investigation reaches the truth of what happened in order to hold those responsible and the instigators to account. Just like any other judicial investigation, including the investigation into the crime of the port, which was and will remain a priority of my work and my commitment towards the Lebanese and the international community.
On the other hand, Prime Minister Miqati called it a setback, but one he believed Lebanon would overcome.
There is no doubt that Thursday's violence is a setback that happened, but absolutely we will overcome that. And our goal is to reach a result where we have cooperation from everyone. And I'm sure that all Lebanese want to achieve the positive result we're talking about. And I'm sure that all Lebanese people want to achieve the positive result we're talking about.
France, the United States, and the United Nations appealed for calm, but also asked for the probe to continue unhindered. In focus is Lebanon's sectarian politics. President Michel Aoun's backing of the probe has generated friction between Aoun's party and Hezbollah. The newly formed cabinet also remains in the risk of collapsing. For now, the country remains on edge. The deadly chaos read like headlines from the 1975 civil war, with the idea of a new conflict terrifying citizens, as multiple crises continue to batter Lebanon.
Actually, I'm standing at a point, it's called Ain al-Ramani Shiyah. This is the point where the actual civil war started. And actually today, there were clashes on the same street. It's like the Christian area is to that side and the Muslim area is onto this side. Right now, it's peaceful all around. The injuries have been reported to be 37 and 6 deaths up so far. No one has been identified. The army or the Minister of Interior, nobody said, not even one name of the perpetrators or the snipers. But things are getting back to the normal on the streets inside Beirut.
West Asia Bureau, WION. World is one.
Like always, we will continue to bring you all the latest updates from the heart of the conflict. Don't go anywhere, we have a lot more lined up for today. But first, as usual, let's take a look at what else is making the headlines across West Asia.
Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid says Israel reserved the right to act against Iran, suggesting that force may be necessary to stop the Iranian nuclear program. United States says that it does not support normalizing ties with Syria. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken added that the U.S. position will not change until there is irreversible progress towards a political solution. One Syrian soldier was killed and 3 others wounded in an Israeli air attack on Syria's Palmyra area. The incident comes days after Syrian air defenses intercepted an Israeli missile attack above the Homs countryside. Azerbaijan and Iran have agreed to mend their ties through dialogue. This comes as relations between Baku and Tehran soared in recent weeks over war games. Biden administration intends to press ahead with its plan to reopen the Jerusalem consulate, with Secretary of State Antony Blinken reiterating the pledge. This comes despite strong Israeli opposition to the move. Health authorities and charities in Gaza are stepping up efforts to persuade women to be tested for breast cancer, hoping to overcome social stigma in the Palestinian enclave over dealing with the disease.
And now to the Iraqi elections. Iraqi Shiite cleric Muqtada Sadr says that his bloc has retained the biggest share of seats in the country's parliament. The bloc won around 73 of the parliament's 329 seats. Now this comes as the parliamentary elections recorded a low voter count. Meanwhile, pro-Iranian groups denounced the elections as a sham. Let's take a look.
Elections in Iraq are no easy feat. Establishing a government here is no easy task. The country is divided along sectarian and political lines, preventing any single party from gaining a majority. This time, the Sadrists claimed the most seats. Shiite cleric Muqtada al-Sadr retained the biggest share of seats. Sadr has long been a crucial player in Iraqi politics. He has millions of devoted followers among Iraqi Shiites. His bloc got around 73 of the parliament's 329 seats.
We congratulate the Iraqi people on the victory of the reform project led by the leader Muqtada al-Sadr. We feel that Iraq has been liberated. We haven't had this feeling since 2003. Today, Iraq is truly liberated from corruption.
Sadr's seat share means that he could emerge as kingmaker. Without Muqtada al-Sadr, no coalition government can be formed. Also likely members of this new government are Sunni blocs Halbuzi and Kurdish leader Barzani. This means that the large blocs have preserved their dominance in Iraq. But the lack of a clear majority will force them to negotiate alliances. With Sadr, Halbuzi and Barzani leading each bloc, they have significantly increased their share of seats. But they are still short of a majority. Another key player here is Nouri Maliki, Iraq's former prime minister and the State of Law alliance leader. His group emerged as the second biggest bloc, but it is highly unlikely that he will form a government with Sadr. However, what marked the elections was the dismal voter turnout. Voter participation hit a new low this year. Preliminary turnout was just 41%, even lower than the modest 44.5% recorded in 2018. Polls were mostly peaceful, held under tight security. Airports were closed and travel between provinces banned, while voters were searched twice at polling stations. Authorities also reported arrest of 77 suspects for electoral violations.
Observers across the country noted a low turnout, which is in line with the officially announced turnout of 41%. It is not up to me to speculate about the reasons for this low turnout. The absence of voters is nevertheless a clear message to the political elite.
For the citizens of Iraq, all hope is now lost. The vote was a major reaction to the anti-government protests that rocked the country in 2019. But the results show that little has changed here. The political elite continue to wield power here.
We had great hope in this election, but today, after the faces we saw are repeated, we lost hope and ambition with these early elections.
I do not think there is hope for change in Iraq. As long as there are parties affiliated with other countries that rule us, Iraq will remain as it is.
In Iraq, alliances tend to form and break up after each election. Sometimes entire blocs can change sides. The vote count and division of seats matter, but at the end, it is the horse trading and parliamentary coalitions that are crucial to building a new government. This vote's aftermath will set the tone for the coming years. The biggest question remains: who holds the key to Baghdad's future? West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
A quiet ruling on Jewish prayers in the Al-Aqsa mosque. Flattening of Palestinian graves in the area, tension among the Palestinian Authority and Jordanian leaderships. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has ignited at an old flashpoint, and it is Al-Aqsa Mosque.
This is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, located in the old city of Jerusalem. A silver-domed mosque inside the 35-acre compound. This complex is referred to as Al-Haram Al-Sharif, or the Noble Sanctuary by Muslims. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is Islam's third holiest site. But the location is also considered holy in Judaism. For Jews, it is known by the name of Temple Mount. Jews believe that the compound is where the biblical Jewish temples once stood. Since decades, it has been a flashpoint, the most contested territory in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Now, a landmark ruling by a Jewish court has flamed tensions. It ruled that silent Jewish prayer inside the Al-Aqsa complex cannot be considered a criminal act. This came after an appeal by Rabbi Aryeh Lippo. He was temporarily banned from entering Al-Aqsa after he repeatedly performed prayers at the compound. The new ruling led to a massive uproar in the region. Palestinians slammed the decision, worried about an Israeli takeover. The Palestinian Prime Minister called for Arab solidarity, asking the world to preserve the status quo of the compound.
We, as Islamic committees and references in Jerusalem, condemn such a decision and consider it invalid because the court is invalid. We consider that this is a prelude to an attempt to divide the Al-Aqsa Mosque in time and place, and therefore this decision is rejected and voided. Hence, we must face such decisions that ignite a fuse that has no beginning or end.
Currently, Jordan acts as the custodian of Al-Aqsa. This was agreed to by both Israel and Jordan in a peace treaty. They decided that the Waqf, or the Islamic Trust, would have control over matters inside the compound. On the other hand, Israel would control external security. Non-Muslims would be allowed on the site during visiting hours, but they would not be allowed to pray there. The new verdict came as a shock for Jordan. Amman slammed the Israeli court ruling, calling it a serious violation of Al-Aqsa's historical and legal status. But analysts say Israel's judiciary has no jurisdiction to rule on this. So the verdict is more of an endorsement than a legal ruling, with the move simmering tensions in the region. An Israeli court in Jerusalem finally revoked the previous ruling. This is not the first time that Al-Aqsa has been a flashpoint. It is the most contested piece of territory in the Holy Land. From the Palestinian Intifada to the recent Gaza conflict, Al-Aqsa has been at the center of it all. It has become a symbol for the Palestinian cause, and it begins with the controlled access to the mosque. Only Palestinians above a certain age are allowed access to Jerusalem on Fridays. Others must apply for a hard-to-obtain permit from Israel. The restrictions cause serious tension at checkpoints, with thousands passing through security checks to pray. There were also reports of Israel destroying graves near Al-Aqsa, to build what it says is a biblical-themed park. For now, Israel may have contained the growing tensions by rejecting the lower court ruling on silent prayers. But anger continues to simmer in the region, waiting to erupt at any moment. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Israeli archaeologists say that they have uncovered the largest known wine press dating back to the Byzantine period. It was used to produce the region's trademark light white wine, distributed widely around the Mediterranean. We take a look.
The former home of ancient vintners. A Byzantine-era industrial-scale wine complex. Almost 1,500 years old, excavated near Tel Aviv. It produced some 2 million liters of the drink annually. Once the world's largest such center at the time. Archaeologists have unearthed 5 massive wine presses.
I'm sitting at the moment in the midst of a large wine press on the trading floor. This is just one of 5 large wine presses at this site, and this gives an idea of the large quantity of wine that was produced here. We're talking about 2 million litres annually from this one site. And this particular kind of wine is what we know as Gaza wine. And Gaza wine was a trademark wine that was from the whole of this area of the southern part of the coastal plain. We have to realize that this was a prestige wine. It was a light white wine, and it was taken to many, many countries around the Mediterranean. We're talking Egypt, we're talking Turkey, we're talking Greece, maybe to southern Italy as well. So this was a wine that was widely distributed around the Mediterranean.
Warehouses, kilns, as well as a variety of jars were also found. The excavations produced tens of thousands of fragments, as well as fully preserved jars used to store the wine. The stone structures were so well preserved that it is still easy to visualize the winemaking process. It started from the platform where piles of grapes split open. This released free-run juice for the choicest wines. Then it moved on to the grape stomping floor and collection basins. Israel is plush with vineyards with over 300 wineries. It is a budding industry of over $40 million. It produces over 40 million bottles of wine, with a harvest of 60,000 tons of wine grapes. But in ancient times, it was more than just a tasty companion to food.
Great importance, not only as an export product, but for many other purposes. For example, first of all, people enjoy drinking wine. But beyond that, this was a major source of nutrition. And this was a safe drink because the water was often contaminated, so they could drink wine safely, and then they could also, of course, take it in as part of their daily diet. Excavation goes well beyond the usual scale of excavations that the Antiquities Authority conducts. A continuous excavation of 2 years, 200 to 300 workers daily, huge site, a huge area of excavation. That will be the challenge of the excavators here, is to work through all the material and to bring it to publication at the end.
The biggest question, however, is, did the final product taste like the wines of today? It is almost impossible to know. Ancient texts describe it as a beverage agreeable to the taste. But with the excavation of this historic wine complex, all we know is that the Holy Land wine has come a long way. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe. I'm Ghadi Francis, and you're watching WION World is One.